little bit about, we're going to be discussing navigating post-bac programs with students. We are here on behalf of the NAAHP post-bac programs committee. You'll see that each of the presenters today represents a region. So the NAAHP meeting, that's me, and this is we're last on this long tour of visiting a lot of different presentations. But I'm Caleb Marsh from Temple University as a representative of NAAHP. Peggy and Joyce, you want to do a brief introduction?
Sure. I'm Peggy Zidek from the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, and I'm representing the CAAHP.
And I'm Joyce Fagel at Shoreline Community College, which is near Seattle and the state of Washington, representing the Western region. Sorry.
Okay. And yes, and Robin, who is the fourth member of our team, she is from UNC Greensboro and is representing the SAAHP region. So we're going to be talking a little bit about post-bac programs today, and just in case there are any new advisors, we're not trying to insult anyone's intelligence today. We just want to make sure that you're aware of kind of what a post-bac program is, and more specifically, how we're going to be defining a post-bac program for this presentation today. You can see that just the book definition there. Anything after a baccalaureate degree, it's specifically designed to help a student transition into professional school after they've completed their degree. Sometimes these are med, sometimes these are dent. These can be a number of different programs. They can support pathways into lots of different health professions, as we will talk about today. Opportunities that are offered, sometimes post-bac programs may offer clinical experiences. They may offer research experiences. Some may offer mentoring or test prep, but all of them will offer academic courses. And so we're going to be talking about just kind of how to help your students navigate this process of looking at post-bac programs and picking the post-bac program that is the right fit for them as an applicant. So the first thing we're going to talk about is how to find a program. Some of these resources you may be aware of and others you may not be. But the best place to probably start is the AAMC's database. It's just literally, if you Google search AAMC post-bac, the Find Post-Baccalaureate Medical Program database will come up. There are about 286 programs listed. This is not a comprehensive list. This doesn't include every post-bac program in the country, but it does include a lot of them. And it's probably going to be the most extensive, comprehensive list that you could find that is available. Even though it's hosted by the AAMC, there are a lot of different post-bac programs here that are, as we mentioned, maybe PA or dent or some of the other health professions. So it's a great place to start. On the right-hand part of the slide, you can kind of see a little bit about what is discussed or how you can sort through this website. You can sort by state or location. You can narrow it down, public versus private, whether it's a certificate granting program or not, whether it has a special focus. You can also look at whether it's an undergraduate or graduate program and things like, does it accept DACA students or not? So we'll talk a little bit about some of the implications of these decisions when you're sorting through this list later. But this is, again, probably your the most basic place to begin. There are also a couple of other things that you can access post-bac CAS. It's definitely not an inclusive list at all, but it is common app. It literally is post-bac common application service, and it is very similar to ADSAS, ACOMIS, and any of those liaison application services that you've seen. You can also just Google post-bac programs, and then also, many students will come to you as an advisor to ask you about what programs are out there, programs that you may already have previous relationships. So you as an advisor can be a really great resource for students who are looking for a post-bac program. All right.
So there are several different types of programs, and we've listed some of the more common ones here. So many of them are going to be for academic record enhancement, depending upon a student's undergraduate GPA, especially in the sciences. They tend to expect that you've taken quite a few science courses, if not the majority of the courses that you need. There are career-changing programs which tend to accept limited science background, or maybe a student who wants to restart all of their science courses because they had a really bad time with their coursework as an undergrad, or they were a non-science major totally with that. There are also other kinds of programs that are specific for students who are underrepresented students. And as you can see under the other category, there are prerequisites for partially completed or some programs that are combination career changer record enhancers. There are also programs in areas like bioethics and nutrition. Next slide. With that. So in choosing a program, it's important to determine whether or not a student wants to take more undergraduate courses or graduate courses, and we'll come back to undergraduate with financing that part of their education in a few slides to come here. But so where will the grades show up on an application? Will they be some in undergrad, some in graduate, or solely in undergraduate or solely in graduate? And then how are these grades going to be calculated? How will the science credits in particular be shown on an application, a current or future application for a student? So we're going to look at a few kinds of applications. Next slide. And so we have a dental application here of an actual applicant from a few years ago. And so you can see that there's freshman, sophomore, junior, senior. They essentially give you, in this screenshot, total hours. You could do by subject, but that's going to give you with the liaison cast, that's going to give you biology, chemistry, physics. It's going to give you science, but not the breakdown that you're seeing here as readily as on the next slide, which is the AMCAS GPA calculation, where you can see freshman, sophomore, junior, senior of undergrad. If a student takes post-bac undergraduate level courses in any kind of program, or design their own kind of program here, then you will have that line be filled. And then there's a cumulative undergrad that would encompass the post-bac. And then the graduate line stays separate, as you can see. The BCPM stands for biology, chemistry, physics, astronomy, math, and statistics. All other is AO, and then the total. So now we're going to transition.
All right, so we're going to talk about some of the things that your students may come to you asking. Sometimes they ask them very directly, but many times they don't know what to ask. So these next few slides are designed in a way to help you kind of help your students kind of ask these types of questions to help them determine what post-bac programs might be a good fit. There are three main types of post-bac programs. A non-certificate granting program, which is basically just courses and advising and test prep and those things. A certificate granting program would have all of those things as well, but would also, at the end of the time, you would be granted a certificate of completion. And those are named and titled various things. And then sometimes these programs are master's granting, degree granting programs. And so in the end, this is really just preferential to your student. So your student needs to ask, will they receive a degree when they complete the post-bac program? Will they receive a certificate, or do they even need, or in many cases want to receive a certificate or a degree? So this is very much the preference of the applicant. And I think all of us on the post-bac committee would say that in the end, it probably doesn't matter if a student goes to any of these post-bac programs structured in any of these ways and does well and performs well on the program and does the things they need to do, can be admitted to professional school. There are also structured and unstructured. And what this means is really just, how is the program built? Is it a little more loose with the flexibility in how and when you can take courses? So for example, how long does the program take? Some programs are 2 years, some programs are 1 year, and some programs are a little bit more loose than that. They may take you as long as you may need to take the courses. And so that may be an important question that a student needs to ask, is how long is it going to take and how long are they willing to devote to the program? How many total credit hours are part of the program? So as Peggy was mentioning earlier, the way the courses are calculated varies by the different professional programs. and how those courses are graded by a post-bac could impact that initial application later. And so how many credits are required? Is it full-time? Is it cohort-based? How many students are enrolled in the program? These are all questions that would be really important for a student to ask. Do I take courses with the general undergraduate student population, or am I only taking classes with other post-bac students? And then also, does it support the health profession that I need? So if I want to go to vet school, and this is a med or dent specific program, can it be adapted to fit my needs, or will I need to look for a program that might fit my needs a little bit better? You can also look at what kind of support is provided to students. So these are important features that a student might want to look for. What kind of advising support would they receive? What kind of learning skills specialist support might they receive? Do they get clinical experiences or even research experiences as part of their post-bac program? These are things that may or may not be included in every program. And if this is an important factor to a student, then this is something that they would definitely want to ask. Is test prep included? This is a very common question that the students ask in most post-bac programs. Will I get DAT or MCAT prep built into the program, or is that something that I would need to do externally? And how is that delivered by a post-bac program if they have it? Can I get a letter of recommendation, or most importantly, students want to know, can I get a committee letter from the program? So these would all be very important questions for students. And before we move on to Joyce's part of the presentation, we're going to talk a little bit about linkages. Sometimes linkages are called articulation agreements. Sometimes they're called conditional acceptances, but basically this is a very similar way of kind of saying the same thing. There is a pipeline program that directly connects a post-bac program to some kind of professional school upon completion of the program. This is typically done in a seamless fashion where a student would complete the program and move directly into into the professional school without any sort of gap year or growth year afterwards. Sometimes they're very direct. Sometimes the post-bac program may actually be housed at a medical school, which would then pipeline a student directly into that medical school. Sometimes post-bac programs have multiple linkages with lots of different institutions. So this would be something that a student would definitely want to look into. And then also comparing costs. All post-bac programs, for the most part, are fairly expensive, but a student would want to look at the cost of living in the city where they're located, scholarships that are offered, and then any kind of FAFSA loans or any financial aid that's available. And with that said, I'll turn things over to Joyce to talk about that.
So hello, yes, we need to make sure to add that none of us are financial aid experts. However, there are a few basics that I think are good for everyone to know, especially if you're working with undergraduate students who are receiving the Pell Grant. They're often not aware that such a thing no longer exists once you have a bachelor's degree. So students might be thinking, oh, I'll sort of continue to do it the way that I have been doing it, but that is not the case. So this is certainly at least a minimum point of conversation to kind of make sure your student understands that. So some of the advantages of being in a degree program, especially a master's program, is that would make the student most likely eligible for loans because it is another degree. If it's not a degree, then normally there is no FAFSA eligibility really at all, with the exception there is such a thing as a 12-month loan for prerequisite courses. This is a once-in-a-lifetime loan through FAFSA, and my financial aid office, fortunately, has been using that with our students. If your financial aid office is not, it's something maybe to ask them about, because it does exist. There are lots of specifications. This cannot be for repeated courses, and they have to be for required courses. So again, it doesn't work out well for everyone, but for some of the students, that is a loan that will help them quite a bit. And I want to add that for those students who are from an underrepresented minority group or another group that has had disadvantages, some of the post-bac programs are designed specifically for students in those groups, and many of those have secured private scholarships in order to bring down the cost, knowing that this group is also very likely affected financially. That's definitely something to look into for those students. Thank you. Applying to post-bac programs, then, as you can kind of tell from the very beginning, can be quite different depending on which programs the students are applying to. So there are quite a few post-bac programs now that are using post-bac CAS, and that's definitely very convenient. However, there are also a lot of schools that don't use post-bac CAS, and they just use whatever their school's, proprietary application is. And then that also means, looking at it, that some schools have competitive enrollment and some schools have open enrollment. And actually, this last part is sort of a new development. If I recall, from 5, 6, 7 years ago, there weren't as many open enrollment programs available, but that is, I think, one of the new developments is open enrollment programs. Most of those are undergraduate programs. As far as competitive programs, it's going to vary as usual in terms of how many applicants do they typically get, and how many spaces there are, as to how competitive that really is. But I would say nowadays, every student could find a postbac program, just because we have a lot more variety than we used to have. Application components then also vary, and again, especially for the open enrollment programs, it's usually pretty minimal, just like a transcript is probably all that they're asking for. But for other programs, there might be interviews. Some programs require that students have already taken the MCAT or DAT, and write personal statements and have a letter of recommendation. So that could be part of their application. I think that's it.
All right.
So this kind of concludes like the presentation part of the session. And we have 4 scenarios that we're going to discuss, and these are hypothetical students. And for each scenario, we're going to post a poll. And so we're asking you to look through the information that we give you and think about what part of this profile is either most problematic or just most important to discuss. And the poll will only let you choose one. And then we'll sort of talk through that together. Let's see. So we are missing a presenter, as we mentioned at the beginning. So normally Peggy does scenario 1. I'm happy to do it, or
all right.
Nobody Robin does number 1, but if any of you.
I can jump in.
Okay, sure. And I will open the poll.
Okay.
All righty.
So our first scenario is a student on the pre-med path. As you can see in the black banner there at the top, biology major, what the science GPA and the number of credits, the cumulative overall GPA, and their MCAT score. And then we have some information that we'd like for you to read and then be able to talk about with the poll. And I'm not seeing the poll, so.
Oh, I submitted it. Could anybody in the chat let us know if you see the poll?
I can see it.
Oh, great.
And you can submit it well, so you're good.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. And Joyce, I can't see the poll just from the presenter view. So let me know when the poll is concluded, so I can move to the.
Yeah, meeting system is different. I cannot see if people are submitting things.
Okay.
So I'm going to count backwards, and then I'll just end the poll. So folks, put in your choice. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm going to end the poll. And can everybody see the results? I can see results.
I can't see the results. So why don't you pick it up, Joyce?
All right. So we had 11 people responding. Most people marked science GPA. And then 1 person marked the healthcare experience.
Okay. So as you can see, what we have highlighted from our respective experiences here, things that we thought you might be noticing in particular were the science GPA, and that there was an upward trend. The MCAT score, is well here, and I'm looking because now I can see the poll. So the science GPA was the number one here in the healthcare experience. And so we've highlighted the healthcare experience and the service as well here. So we're going to go into some suggestions that we have about how you might have conversation with a student in similar sort of situation. Again, this is just a scenario. We definitely recommend open-ended conversation, not just yes or no questions, because you won't get really a good discussion, at least from our experience. So asking the student to describe their undergraduate science courses and GPA, sort of what happened that led to their trend. How did they prepare for the MCAT score? Because there's definitely a difference, a dichotomy there between their science GPA and their MCAT score. And then our recommendations from this kind of scenario is potentially an academic record enhancement program, and probably an undergraduate program could be warranted, where you're enrolled in a minimum of 30 credits of additional science coursework. If you're repeating any coursework, that's in addition to the 30 additional new credits of coursework, and hopefully demonstrating strong academic performance. So if we want to go to scenario number 2.
I think, Peggy, just to add, I think a lot of medical schools will have a 3.0 minimum for undergrad GPA. So that's the why the student needs to raise their undergrad GPA. And then they might even do like 1 year undergrad and then do a master's degree. That's another possibility.
Yeah.
Okay. Scenario 2 is a pre-dentistry student. I'm going to go ahead and launch the poll. So this student, you see the kind of the numbers on top, the science GPA, but also how many hours, as well as the overall GPA, no DAT just yet. And then I'll give you a little bit of time to read the other information. Okay, I'll do my count. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, end the poll. So the results are very interesting. They're a little bit more spread out, which completely makes sense. So 33%. Well, we only have 6 people who did the poll, so I guess that's not that many people. But anyway, 2 people chose science GPA, 1 person healthcare experience, and 3 career decision. So let's go to the next slide. I mean, all of them make sense because they're all kind of linked in this sense that this student is just now changing their career intentions. So yes, career decision is really big because the student really still needs to learn a lot more and explore dentistry. And then, of course, when we look at the science GPA, the GPA is very low, but there are very few classes. And the overall GPA is very high. So this is actually a pretty good position to be in for what we would call a career-changing student. Like their overall GPA is actually fantastic. So nothing, no regrets or any difficulties there. Now it's just a matter of studying science and taking the prereq classes, as well as exploring what dentistry is all about. So on the next slide.
Yeah, and I'll also add with that science GPA, this is a very common scenario where you see a student who might have taken like 1 math course or something like that far before they ever had any decision to be or to pursue any sort of health profession. So seeing a 2.2 and 4 credit hours of a science course is not uncommon.
Yeah, and it's just not that big of a deal. By the time they take all those other science classes, is not going to affect it all that much. Sometimes this is also a student who did start, not with the way we wrote this one up, but they did start and maybe they took general chemistry in a really competitive large class with 400 students and decided it wasn't for them back in their first year. But now they're a little bit older, more mature, and they're ready to try it again. So that's a slightly different, but the numbers would look potentially the same. So yeah, with this student, the first question is really, let's talk about dentistry and how did you become interested, and then, let's talk a little bit about that science. This could vary. This could be a student who did have a strong science education earlier in high school and just kind of needs to review and then go back into that. But it could be a student who truly has never had strong math or science background. And then, you definitely want to explore a little bit like how to get started in some, pretty basic classes to build those skills. So there's the career changer students. Those are usually undergraduate programs because after all, you can't, you're not ready for advanced graduate level science courses. So, but there are definitely post-bac programs for career changing students available. Great.
Okay. All right, so Joyce, you're going to have to help me out again because in presenter mode, I can't see any of the polls. But here we have another student, pre-med, a psych major, 3.6 science GPA with 30 credit hours in science, overall of a 3.5, MCAT score of a 5.05, and then you can read the rest. So looking forward to seeing how everyone diagnoses this particular case study.
So the poll's open.
Let's give a little more time this time for them to read.
Yeah, maybe I didn't give it enough time. It's hard because
we can't see.
This particular format I cannot see as it's rolling in. How are we doing on time, Caleb?
We're good. We're doing well.
Yeah.
We're probably going to have some good Q&A time at the end as well. All right, can probably start.
Okay, so I'll count a little faster. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Last chance and poll. Okay, so we have let's see, healthcare experience. 2 people selected that, 4 people MCAT score, and 1 person the career decision, and nobody for the science GPA.
Sure. Okay, great. So I think you guys hit on it. The main thing, at least the main thing that we saw, I think you're right. I mean, the GPA, the science GPA, the MCAT score, those are all pretty strong. I mean, a student with these kinds of numbers definitely traditionally can get into professional school. So I think the numbers are less of a concern. We see they volunteered in a crisis hotline, and they've worked at a center for victims of abuse for quite a long time. They have no leadership experience, though. But the biggest piece here, and I think, Joyce, did you say 1 person hit on this? It's career choice. So it's trying to decide between maybe something like a psychology PhD or a PsyD or psychiatry. Given that to get a PhD in psychology, you don't have to go to medical school, but to become a psychiatrist, you do. And so, depending on that path, and also helping the student know that even if they went on to medical school, they would have to do rotations in a lot of different things. And so even if they are interested in psychiatry, they still might have to do, or they will have to do surgeries and other rotations. So yes, you want to talk with them about their career aspirations. Really, what are you interested in learning? Letting them know again that they're going to have to be exposed to a lot of different specialties. Asking them how they may be prepared for the MCAT. So that could be potentially something that they could improve. Even though it's a pretty good score, it could be better. But the main thing is this person probably doesn't need a post-bac program. This person probably needs just to take an MCAT prep course and really just clarify their career goals and get as much exposure to these different aspects of healthcare to really be sure that the pathway that they're taking moving forward is the right one for them. Okay. Next
Yep.
scenario.
Then scenario number 4 is another pre-med hypothetical student here, the nutrition major, science GPA, as you can see, of a 3.4 with 40 hours, cumulative overall GPA of a 3.2, MCAT score 498. And then you can look at the trend service, leadership research, healthcare, and subjective information that we've listed. So give them a chance to read and then put up the poll, I guess.
Oh,
Try
okay.
something new.
Yeah, the poll's up.
Okay.
And especially for those of you that have been with us at any of the other regional meetings, we definitely appreciate you coming back if you're listening to us again.
Oh no, if anybody would do this twice, but
Well, they can get all the poll questions right every time.
yeah, that's true. Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and end poll.
Okay.
Peggy, can you see it or?
Time, yes.
Okay.
So it looks like we had 11 people in this poll that responded. At least so, 4 people with the MCAT score, 4 with healthcare experience, 2 with application decision, and 1 with the science GPA with that. So again, just looking at the MCAT score, the cumulative, and the science GPA, one thing that stood out for us and stood out for you as well was the healthcare experience. Yeah, when we wrote none there, had this conversation with students, with that. But they're highly confident of their abilities and they want to retake the MCAT and apply now with that. So then it's looking, yes, again at the science GPA, their MCAT score. Their grades were consistent throughout undergrad. That's an important piece here with the 3.4 and 40 hours. And so if we go to the next slide, our recommendations for conversations was, to have the student describe, to tell you more about their science courses, what they struggled in, what they, were very strong in and why. What's their interpretation of their transcript, especially their science courses and GPA. How did they prepare for the MCAT? What led them to decide to pursue medicine, since there's really no healthcare experience listed. So we have definitely recommended some sort of post-bac program for the student, and that they definitely need, if they really are pre-med, to explore medicine and patient care, because maybe they decide it's not for them. I had a student years ago that a faculty member, when I was an undergrad pre-health professions advisor, a faculty member sent a student to me who was very involved in research. And I wanted the student to talk to me about MD, PhD programs. And in probing the student with their interest in medicine, they were not interested in medicine. In fact, they were not interested in any profession that would require them to touch a human being, a living human being. So research really was their focus.
All right.
So now we're down to the questions.
Yes.
Yeah, I want to acknowledge that I'm noticing in the chat that the poll did cause problems for people to see the slides.
Okay.
Which, I was kind of busy not looking at the chat. So I apologize for that. This presentation system is definitely different from the other ones we were using at the other regions. But anyway, hopefully it was still informative.
Yeah.
I don't see other questions in the chat.
I was going to say thank you guys for the feedback too. But I'm going to actually give you our contact information here so that you can see us. Again, we represent each of the regions of SAP, NAAHP, Central, and Western region. And so if you are interested in getting involved in the post-bac community, especially if you're part of a post-bac program, reach out to us. But we're here as a resource for advisors and other post-bac programs alike. So just let us know. I'm actually going to close the show, the slideshow, so that we can just do Q&A. Now I can actually see everything again. This is nice.
Yeah. And I do have a question for you guys. So
Okay.
when you talked about a student taking undergraduate coursework as a post-bac student and recommended 30 plus credits, why 30 plus credits?
So in this case, we're actually talking about a semester school, so probably maybe should have said 30 hours. So there are quite a few medical schools who will especially look at the last 30, or it varies per school, or 45 semester hours for the grades. So to look at the most recent ones. But the number varies. So 30 was kind of a minimum, to be honest. I'm on a quarter system, so for us that would be a minimum of 45 quarter credits. But really, depending on the schools that they're targeting, it's good to look that up, whether or not they have such a policy, and how many credits then specifically would be their target.
It's what?
Go on. I see a question about, can you each discuss unique features of your own programs?
Yes. So there are two. That's a two-part. Well, not a two-part question, but the question above that was, do you want us asking questions in the chat box or the Q&A section? You can just type them as Julie has done here into the chat. I'll briefly talk about my program, and then we want to get through that quickly so we can get to other questions. But my program at Temple University in Philadelphia has a 35-person career changer track, and we also have another track with 60 people with an academic record enhancer, undergraduate graded, structured program that we do provide standardized test prep. That's just it in a nutshell. But Peggy or Joyce, do you want to kind of give yours too?
My program at the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor is a master's program in physiology. It has 34 credits, 33 or 34 of which are science credits for you there. And it's over 3 semesters, fall, winter, and spring term. We offer a research track and a coursework track. The research track, half of the credits are research, half of the credits are academic enhancement.
So in my program is quite unusual for it being at a community college, and we are unstructured, and it's kind of an a la carte. So mainly, of course, we have all the foundational science classes, but we do also have a number of upper division biology classes, as well as a strong biochemistry classes. And then we offer support seminars on issues in healthcare, applying, and support for MCAT and other test studies as well.
Great, thank you. See, another question for that same scenario with 30 plus credit recommendation. Do those 30 plus credits include the ones they would have to redo because they didn't do well the first time? I'll briefly answer, and then I think this is a great example of how many different scenarios there might be for students, and kind of one of the points of this presentation today, which was to let you know that it's not a one-stop shop. It's not a one-size-fits-all. There are a lot of different post-bac programs, and one student may be a perfect fit for mine, and another may be a better fit for Peggy or Joyce's program, depending on some of those questions that they're asking themselves, what they can do, the time frame that they can do them in. Do they need just 1 or 2 courses in repair work, or do they need a kind of a massive overhaul of 30 plus credits? So it really does depend. I would encourage you to have the students, or even you guys, reach out to us and ask us specifically about individual circumstances. If you wanted to, be happy to, I would be happy to talk to any advisor. I can't speak for everyone on the panel, but I think we would all be happy to speak with any advisor who has questions about a specific scenario.
And I want to add that I have a lot of students in a position where their grades, for example, in general chemistry, organic chemistry, are definitely so low that they really need to be repeated so that they actually understand it better. But that by itself is not going to impress a medical school or the health profession school. So they need additional courses that are new to them. So generally speaking, that 30 credits was meant to be new courses, not repeated courses. But again, so many factors go into this. And then there's another question. Oh, Peggy.
I was just going to say, there's not a one size fits all.
Yeah. So the other question of what is this post-bac in public health. And yeah, I mean, the writing already says it. That isn't necessarily going to raise the science GPA. So that's definitely something to talk about. What is the current science GPA? Are there additional science classes that could be taken? How important is it to put more emphasis on science courses? Obviously, public health is a fantastically interesting subject matter of its own. So I'm not necessarily saying it's a bad post-bac program, but it might not be a strong anyway, if science GPA is the issue, then that might not be a strong fit.
And more specifically, if it's undergraduate science GPA, because if this is an MPH, which is what a lot of students want to do after, again, as Joyce said, MPH is great, useful in a lot of areas, but a master's in public health is not going to help a student raise their undergraduate science GPA.
Yeah. So to me, it depends what that undergraduate science GPA is and the trend that's happened, like junior and senior years with that. There are some epidemiology MPHs that give 20 to 24 credits of science. So when I was an undergraduate pre-health advisor, I did have some students who use some epidemiology MPHs as an academic record enhancement, and successfully.
So we have another great question. It's in the question part, not in the chat part.
We did miss one in the chat part,
okay,
which was
let's get to this one first, because this is an important question, and we'll get back to that one. Because this one is one of that we probably all want to weigh in on, and we're kind of running out of time. So many times I have students with GPA clearly needs work, but their choices for post-bac programs are limited because they haven't taken the MCAT. I hate to advise them to take the MCAT if they aren't ready to apply to med school. Taking the MCAT for purposes of getting into a post-bac program seems like a poor use of resources. Any thoughts on why so many post-bac programs require students to have taken MCAT? I'll answer this first, and I'm only going to answer this for my program. I'll let other programs speak. Our program, for example, does not require the MCAT. We feel very much the same way that you do at our program about it's maybe not necessarily a waste of resources, but we also know that when a student finishes our program, learns the material in our program, and takes our built-in MCAT prep, by the end of the program, they're going to be much better positioned to take the test than they would be before they got in. A lot of reason people need an academic record enhancer is because they don't have the foundation. They haven't built the knowledge base to do well on the test. And programs like ours will help them do that. Of course, if they're a career changer, they can't be expected to take the MCAT because they've never seen the material before. So, my experiences are that the reason that they are doing that is for a reason that it is something that we wouldn't experience at our program and is not required. So, Peggy, Joyce.
Yeah. So with my program being a master's program, most master's programs in the state of Michigan at least have required some sort of standardized test. We have recommended that students take the GRE instead of the MCAT or the DAT if they're not prepared for their professional school standardized test with that. This next year, we're going to make standardized tests optional, but we have required a standardized test, but I've never wanted a student to quickly prepare for the MCAT. Instead, we've offered that students could take the GRE. We also pre-PA students pre-PhD, and the GRE works for them as well. But we are going to test optional next year.
And then, no, none of the undergrad programs are going to require the MCAT. We do have some students who will be with us and take their basic sciences, then take the MCAT, and then but they might choose to do a one-year master's degree, after that. Different kinds of pathways for different students. But there are many more programs now than there used to be. And so, look again, because if you had looked more closely like 5 years ago, that's probably what you were seeing. And it's really changed.
Agreed. Yep. Amanda, posed to each of you, do you have a lot of out-of-state applicants relocate specifically for your programs, or are your students more alumni or local? In our program, we have students from across the country. Practically every state is represented. In the Northeast, they do tend to slant toward New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Maryland. But there's literally students from all over the country that apply and are also admitted to our program.
So we also have students from around the country. It sort of depends each year which ones choose to come to our program that we accept based on out-of-state tuition. But every year we have out-of-state students. This year, over half of our students are out-of-state coming in.
Yeah, and for me, being based in the Seattle area, they're almost all local. We have very, very limited post-bac options in our state, which is actually the reason that we started this program at my school. I actually do have a couple of students who moved from California and Florida up to Seattle for the program, but mostly it's local.
So we see Jan has asked a question, and I see Bailey has reiterated it about pipeline versus linkage. I think I might, Joyce and Peggy, correct me if I'm wrong here. I think mine's the only program with a linkage or pipeline connection.
Mine doesn't have.
Okay, so I'm gonna be very careful here because I'm really only speaking for Temple's post-bac program in this case. There are a lot of different ways these are done. In our post-bac program, for example, we have a linkage with Lewis Katz. We have a linkage with George Washington. We have a linkage with PCOM. We have a linkage. We just have a new linkage, PA linkage with SUNY Downstate, and we have a medical linkage with SUNY Downstate. So these would all be programs where our students take the courses within the confines of our program. They don't actually take courses with anyone at the professional school. So, but they are taught by professional school faculty. So some folks from the med school or the podiatry school come and teach our post-bac students basically at the level that they would be teaching them in professional school. So every one of our students says when they finish our program and they apply via linkage that they're very prepared for their first year of professional school. And so they all work differently for all of those schools that I mentioned, all have a very different, they all have different contracts essentially. So the linkage requirements for GW, the linkage requirements for Lewis Katz, PCOM, SUNY Downstate, etc., are all very different. So, yeah, that's one of the things that I would add. And thank you, Amanda. I appreciate you coming to this presentation twice. That's very nice of you to say. Julie, can you please clarify the pros and cons of attending a program that awards a certificate? It's kind of going back to the slide that I had earlier. As far as admission, there aren't really any huge pros or cons. I mean, it is like I said, if you take 30 credit hours of something, you do well in those classes, you do well in the MCAT, and you apply, whether you get a certificate or not, you've positioned yourself as an applicant to be able to be admitted to professional school. So it's really, one of the reasons we used to have last year, we weren't a certificate granting program, and this year we are. And we've seen really no difference in our students' ability to get accepted. But we had students last year who would say, but I want something at the end of my time here that says that I've completed this thing. And so that was one of the reasons we implemented the certificate. It's really just preferential because now that student has the ability to show that to a parent or show that to a colleague or a friend, or potentially demonstrate to an employer if they decide not to go into professional school that they have some level of experience or expertise in some upper level science coursework. So I've talked a lot. Peggy, Joyce, you guys want to weigh in on certificate?
Well, yeah, I agree with the certificate. I see the last question is about the loan. So overall, the way that FAFSA, the federal system, works is that you can only be eligible for anything, whatever it is, if you're in a degree program. So then if you're not, if you're like in this in-between stage of I'm either repeating some classes or doing some certificate or, an enhancement courses, then you're not at that moment in a degree program. But there is such a thing, and it's a once in a lifetime that you can get it. It's a 12-month loan for prerequisite courses. And again, my financial aid staff at my school works with students to apply for that. The students have to submit a study plan. They have to submit at least one potential school that they're applying to with the list of required courses. So there's quite a bit of detail in planning that, but I believe they can get up to like $12,000 maybe. So that's what I know. And again, a little bit sketchy, but I do have a number of students who are doing that.
Some students might also decide to delay graduation to take more undergraduate courses if they're at a four-year institution. As an example, if they still have loan eligibility left, because I believe with FAFSA it's 10 semesters, or it was when I was an undergrad advisor, 10 full semesters. So if there were 2 half semesters together, they counted as 1 full semester.
Yeah, that's definitely something to explore. If the student hasn't graduated yet, and they don't have too many credits yet, can they add a minor maybe? And could that be supported through whatever funding they've got so far? That's thanks for bringing that up, Peggy, because we hadn't gotten to that yet today. I think we're over time, or how is it?
We're right at it. So thank you all. These have been great questions. We hope we were able to answer them, and we hope we didn't skip anyone. If we did, we apologize. But thank you for attending today, and we really do appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of NAAHP.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.